Tatsuya was an ugly, disgusting loser who had no magical abilities even though he attended a school for young magicians. However, he was an overpowered tech genius who pulled all the girls without even trying. Years before the recent events took place, the entire world was a battlefield as World War III had broken out and lasted for 20 years due to a lack of food and energy sources. The only reason the war ended was because the world's magic technicians came together in solidarity. So now every nation is hell-bent on producing top-notch magicians. These magicians aren't your regular, everyday magic wielders. They use technology to boost their powers and strengthen themselves. Now in the present day, these upcoming magicians with a twist must attend Hogwarts. Magic high schools. Tatsuya and Miyuki were among the few students who wrote and passed the entrance exams, so they were admitted into the first magic high school. The only problem was that Tatsuya was accepted as a reserve, which Miyuki didn't think was fair, as he had the best scores during the exams. On the day the entrance ceremony took place, Miyuki kept complaining about how unfair it was that the school didn't acknowledge Tatsuya's skills. However, Tatsuya reminded her that the school prioritized practical skills over written exams. Since he was more or less the same as Mashburn Dead, there was no way he'd be given the same treatment as those who could use magic. He asked her not to get all riled up on his behalf because he was grateful that he was given the chance to attend the school. He thanked her for worrying about him and assured her that he would be fine, after which he suggested she go practice her speech for the ceremony, as she was the student representative for the first year. When she walked away, he decided to wander around the school grounds. It was during that time he bumped into Mayumi, the student council president. The first thing he noticed was that she was a Course 1 student like Mayumi, and wore a casting-assisted device otherwise known as a CAD. When he introduced himself to Mayumi, she seemed interested in him, but before she could ask him questions, someone interrupted them. Tatsuya excused himself and headed to the auditorium, leaving Mayumi to stare at his broad shoulders as he walked away. Inside the auditorium, he sat at the back with his fellow Course 2 students, who were referred to as weeds by the Course 1 students who called themselves blooms, because they were better at using magic. While he waited for the ceremony to begin, 2 girls who introduced themselves, Mizuki and Erika, took the empty seats beside him. Soon after, the ceremony began, and after the opening speech was delivered by Mayui, Miyuki gave her speech. After the ceremony, Tatsuya stood with Mizuki and Erika, who suggested they go check out their classroom. Tatsuya told them he couldn't accompany them as he had to wait for his sister, so Mizuki asked if Miyuki was his sister. He told her yes and asked if she'd made the connection because of their surnames. Mizuki admitted that she could read auras and said that Miyuki's aura was similar to Tatsuya's. This revelation set off warning signals in Tatsuya's head, as Mizuki's ability, known as hypersensitive to spirit emission particles, could help her learn his secret if he allowed her to observe him further. Just then, Miyuki arrived with Mayumi and Hanzo, the student council vice president. When Miyuki noticed the girls, she teased her brother, saying he'd already used his infinite rizzing powers to get potential harem members. Tatsuya assured her that it wasn't the case and allowed the girls to introduce themselves to one another. After their introductions, he asked Miyuki if she was done speaking with the student council members. Before Miyuki could respond, Mayumi spoke up and told them that she would invite Miyuki to their office on another day so they could speak. After that, she and Hanzo, who didn't bother hiding the fact that he was a hater just like Draco Malfoy, walked away. The next day, the siblings visited a training dojo, and the moment they set foot on the property, Tatsuya was attacked by a bunch of ninjas. While Miyuki stood back watching her brother bring out his inner Bruce Lee, Yakumo, the dojo master, snuck up on her. Miyuki tried to tell him why they had come, but Yakumo was more interested in her school uniform. He soon began acting like a lecherous old geezer and tried to touch her, but Tatsuya attacked him. The two began fighting one another until Yakumo knocked Tatsuya down, proving he was the better fighter. Later at school, a boy named Leo introduced himself to Tatsuya and asked what his signature magic spells were. Tatsuya told him he was bad at using magic, so he was doing his best to become a magic engineer. Upon hearing this, Erika, who had been standing like a mannequin the whole time Leo made his introduction, spoke up. Since Leo had no idea who she was, he called her a boy, which made Erika call him a rude brat. The two ended up throwing insults at one another like they were the main characters of an enemy-to-lovers movie. During lunch, Tatsuya sat with Leo, Erika, and Mizuki, and while they were eating, Miyuki walked over to their table. But before she could sit down, some of her classmates called out to her. They asked Miyuki to sit with them, stating that it was beneath her to sit with a bunch of weeds. This statement triggered Leo to the point where he would have started his version of Brawl Stars right there in the cafeteria. Thankfully, Tatsuya diffused the situation by getting up and leaving, so his friends went after him. Unfortunately, that was only the beginning of the Clash of Clans Battle Royal, because after school, Miyuki's snobby course, one classmates tried to stop her from going home with Tatsuya. Mizuki pointed out that they had no right to dictate what Miyuki did just because they were blooms, which pissed them off. One of the boys swore to show her why the blooms were superior, so he tried to launch an attack. Lo quickly rushed to disarm him before he could complete his casting, but Erika beat him to it and knocked the boy's CAD out of his hand using her baton. And knowing that one of their own had been humiliated by a weed, the others began casting spells. Miyuki panicked, but Tatsuya assured her that everything would be fine, just as something broke the casting circle a bloom girl was making. It turned out to be a counterspell cast by Mayumi, who told them that using magic against other students was prohibited. The girl with her then introduced herself as Mary, the head of the disciplinary committee, and asked them to come with her to give her their statements. Tatsuya was the first to speak up, and he assured Mary that they were only showing off their skills to one another. Mary didn't believe him and pointed out that the girl Mayumi disarmed was going to activate an attack-type spell. Tatsuya had explained that the girl's spell wasn't potent enough to cause harm to anyone, making her realize he could read activation sequences as they were being launched. However, that wasn't enough to convince her that they had only been fooling around, so Miyuki stepped up and begged her to let it go. Mayumi also backed her up, saying there was nothing wrong if they wanted to teach each other a few spells. Since Mayumi was clearly on their side, Mary backed off and gave them all a strained warning before taking her leave. Once she and Mayumi were gone, the boy who began the whole thing introduced himself as Shun and told Tatsuya that he didn't owe him anything for covering up for him. He then angrily walked away with his classmates, who sided with him, leaving behind the girl Mayumi disarmed and her friend, before they could head home and thank Tatsuya for helping them. The girls, whose names were Honoka and Shizuku, also apologized for what their empty-headed classmates did. To prove that they weren't as vain as the other Course 1 students, they offered to walk to the station with Tatsuya and the others. On their way to the station, the group discussed Erika's CAD, which happened to be her baton. She gave them a detailed explanation of how it worked when Leo asked questions, and they all found it impressive. The next day, on their way to school, the siblings were stopped by Mayumi, who invited them to the student council office for lunch. Once it was lunchtime, Tatsuya and Miyuki arrived at the students' council office as agreed, and while they sat down to each, he introduced the siblings to the other members, by Mary and Susan the treasurer and Azusa the secretary. After they finished eating, Mayumi revealed the reason she had invited them. She wanted Miyuki to join the student council. Miyuki thanked her for offering her the position, but said she wasn't qualified enough to take it. She told them that Tatsuya would be a better fit, and said that if they insisted on giving her the position, they should also offer Tatsuya one. Mayumi told her that if she were to allow Tatsuya to join the student council, the other students would get angry. She explained that it was an unwritten rule that Course 2 students could never join the student council, which made Miyuki sad. However, Mary turned things around by suggesting that Tatsuya join the disciplinary committee instead. Mayumi agreed that it wouldn't pose a problem, but Tatsuya protested. He pointed out that the Blooms wouldn't be happy if a weed such as himself tried to caution them. However, Mary assured him that it didn't matter and asked him to meet her after school so she could explain things in detail. After school, the siblings returned to the student council office where Hanzo reintroduced himself to Miyuki, completely ignoring Tatsuya. Mary then asked Tatsuya to accompany her to the disciplinary committee office, but Hanzo stopped them before they could leave. He voiced his disapproval about letting Tatsuya join the disciplinary committee, stating that as a weed, his skills were inferior. Mary told him to shove his opinions up his garbage chute because Tatsuya was perfectly skilled for the job. She explained Tatsuya's ability to read activation sequences before they were launched, but Hanzo refused to believe it. He insisted that Tatsuya be removed from the committee, but Miyuki tried to reason with him. She insisted that her brother was skilled and said the only reason he failed the practice exams was because his skills weren't compatible with the school's method of assessment. Still, Hanzo refused to change his mind and accused Miyuki of trying to use nepotism to get Tatsuya the job. Eventually, Tatsuya spoke up and challenged Hanzo to a simulated battle to prove his skills to the pompous asshole. Before the battle began, Mary explained the rules and let each of them know what must be done to emerge the winner. Hanzo didn't pay much attention as he was confident he would win the match. In his mind, he'd already seen how the battle would go and was sure victory would be his. However, when Mary gave them the signal to begin, Tatsuya knocked him out almost immediately. He moved faster than the Flash himself, and since Hanzo hadn't expected it, he couldn't defend himself. Everyone had been left stunned, and Mary asked Tatsuya if he deployed a self-acceleration spell before the match began. Tatsuya told her that he hadn't made use of magic, and Miyuki explained that Tatsuya was undergoing ninjutsu training under Kakashi, Suri Master Yakumo. Impressed by this revelation, Mayumi asked what spell he'd used to knock Hanzo out, so he told her he'd used Shin Waves. He explained that since Hanzo hadn't been expecting the Shin Waves, it had caused him to get dizzy and lose consciousness. Suzanne further explained that the technique was called compound waves. She said Tatsuya had created 3 consecutive waves of varying frequencies, which he directed at Hanzo and knocked him down. Azusa then asked Tatsuya if his CAD was a silver horn, which was a brand of CAD produced by Taurus Silver, a genius magic engineer. When she mentioned that the silver horn was designed to optimize loop casting, Mayumi pointed out that it didn't make sense for Tatsuya to have used the silver horn to knock Hanzo out. Susan was able to deduce that Tatsuya had found a way to make the loop casting work in his favor, and Tatsuya didn't deny it. Just then, Hanzo woke up from his forced power nap and grudgingly accepted that Tatsuya was no match for him. He also apologized to Miyuki for being rude to her earlier, but refused to apologize to Tatsuya for looking down on him before he walked away. Soon after he left, Mary took Tatsuya to the disciplinary committee office to discuss his new role. Upon entering the office and seeing that it was as messy as a teenage boy's room, Tatsuya asked for permission to clean it up. While they cleaned, Mary informed him that Shun would join the disciplinary committee, which surprised him as he clearly remembered Shun despised his guts. The next moment, Kaotaro and Midori, 2 other members of the committee, arrived, and they were surprised to learn that Tatsuya would be joining their team. When they tried to question Mary's decision to bring him on board, she let them know that Tatsuya made a fool of Hanzo in a mock battle. The 2 were surprised, as it was general knowledge that Hanzo had never lost a fight since he enrolled at the school. Almost immediately, they began singing a different tune and said it was a good idea to have Tatsuya on their team. They then welcomed him to the team while Mary watched them with a smile. The following week, the discipline committee had a meeting to discuss their roles for the upcoming club recruitment week. She charged each of them with upholding the peace during the week-long event, and then introduced Tatsuya and Shun to them as the new members. After the meeting, Mary handed Shun and Tatsuya their armbands and told them that they were allowed to use their CAD if the situation called for it. Tatsuya then asked if he could make use of some of the old equipment the committee had, and Mary said yes. Later on, while Tatsuya was patrolling, he rescued Erika from the midst of some upperclassmen who wanted her to join their clubs. As the 2 walked around, Erika suggested going to the gym to check out the clubs there. While they were there, they witnessed a confrontation between Mibu, a kendo club member, and Kurihara, the head of the Kenjutsu club. To settle their differences, they decided to duel, and Mibu showed Kurihara that she was the better swordsman. However, Kurihara proved he was a sore loser when he activated his CAD and attacked Mibu. Thankfully, Super Tatsuya got in the way and struck his 2 CADs together to deactivate Kurihara's CAD. He then twisted Kurihara's arm and pinned him to the ground before making a call to report the incident. Kurihara's buddies didn't appreciate their friend being manhandled by a common weed, so they attacked Tatsuya, who beat them all up. Later that day, Tatsuya explained the incident that occurred at the gym before a panel consisting of Mayumi, Mary, and Jumanji. Jumanji, the president of the Extracurricular Activity Federation. He'd assured them that Kurihara felt remorseful for his actions, so Mary asked Jumanji to handle his punishment since he'd used a highly lethal spell. After leaving the panel, Tatsuya met up with Miyuki and their friends, and while they had dinner, Leo asked how he'd been able to jam Kurihara's spell. Erika and Mizuki were also curious to know how he did it, because only those who had Antonite were able to cast jam. Tatsuya told him that he was the reincarnation of Asta, and had just unlocked the ability to nullify magic. In other words, Tatsuya had simply applied the theories of cast jamming and created a new spell called specific magic jamming, using 2 CADs. Leo thought it was impressive and asked why he had yet to share this discovery with the world. This time around, it was Erika who explained to their pea-brained friend that if word got out that there was another way to nullify magic spells, A lot of things could go wrong. The next day, during his patrol, Tatsuya received a call informing him of a brawl in the gym, so he rushed there. However, before he got there, he was attacked by an unknown assailant, but was able to nullify his spell before he was hurt. The assailant was quick to flee the scene, but not before Tatsuya noticed the color of the CAD he had on. The following week, while Tatsuya escorted Miyuki to the student council office, Mibu approached them and thanked Tatsuya for helping her. She also asked if he could chat with her for a bit, so he told her to wait for him in the cafe. When she walked away, Miyuki told her brother that she had a bad feeling about Mibu. Tatsuya assured her that he would be fine and promised to meet up with her once he was done speaking with Mibu. When he met Mibu at the cafe, she thanked him again and said she was grateful he had been the one to handle the situation. When he asked why, she told her that most members of the committee didn't care about doing what was right and just used the committee as a way to earn merit points. She then asked him to join the kendo club, but Tatsuya turned down her offer politely and asked why she wanted to recruit him to join the club. Mibu said it was because having him in the club would boost their chances when they went to the school board to demand equality among all the students. The next day during lunch, Tatsuya told Mary and the council members what Mibu said about the disciplinary committee members using their position to chase clout. Mary assured him that they didn't do things like that, and Mayumi pointed out that someone might be spreading lies about the disciplinary committee misusing their authority. This prompted Tatsuya to ask if the manipulator might be connected to the anti-magic international political organization known as Blanche. Mayumi and Mary were surprised that he knew about Blanche since all information regarding them was confidential. Tatsuya said it didn't matter how he knew and criticized the government's decision to keep the organization's existence a secret. Later that day, Tatsuya was summoned to the counseling room by Ono, the school counselor, who wanted him to participate in a psychological evaluation. After his evaluation, he got up to leave and Ono told him to come to her if Mibu ever caused him problems, since she heard they were hanging out with each other. Meanwhile, Mibu met with Kino, who told her she had to do everything within her power to convince Tatsuya to join them because they needed his power. That night, Tatsuya briefed Miyuki on Blanche and told her that they were a terrorist group who masqueraded as an organization seeking to breach the gap between magicians and non-magicians. He said the organization had already sunk its claws into the school and told her about the attack that occurred during his patrols. Tatsuya was sure they were manipulating the students into doing their bidding because they knew they were desperate to prove to the Course 1 students that they were as good as them even though they lacked magical skills. He said if Blanche were to continue with their plans, the only ones who could stop them were the 10 master clans, most especially the Jatsuba clan to which they belonged. Miyuki didn't like the idea of their connection to the Jatsuba clan being exposed, but Tatsuya assured her that he would do everything in his power to stop that from happening. Even if he had to take on the terrorist group himself, he was willing to do so to protect their new life. A few days later, Tatsuya met with Mibu again and told her that he couldn't join her cause as he didn't share the same beliefs as her. Later that day, while the students waited for their teacher, a voice over the school's public address system demanded that the student council negotiate with them. As it turned out, a group of students had taken over the broadcasting room and locked themselves inside. When Miyuki and Tatsuya arrived, Mary briefed them on the situation and said they had to find a way to get the situation under control. After listening to what Suzanne and Jomonji had to say, Tatsuya called Mibu and learned that she was one of the students locked inside the broadcasting room. He told her that the student council was ready to negotiate with her group and assured her that they would not be taken into custody, so she agreed to come outside. However, when they opened the doors, the disciplinary committee captured Mibu's comrades. This made Mibu call Tatsuya a liar. Chiwanji intervened and told her that Tatsuya hadn't betrayed her because they were still going to listen to their demands but on their terms. Just then, Mayumi showed up and asked that Mibu's group be set free before asking Mibu to accompany her so they could talk. The following day, the siblings stopped Mayumi on her way to school and asked her what was decided upon during her meeting with Mibu. She told them the meeting had been a bust as they couldn't agree. However, it was decided that they would hold an open debate after school so each side could talk things out in public. Later that day of school, Tatsuya spotted Kino speaking to an uncomfortable-looking Mizuki. This made him approach them, and after giving Kino a once-over, Tatsuya was certain he'd been the person who attacked him a few weeks ago. However, he didn't say anything in regards to the incident and instead told Kino that he was making Mizuki uncomfortable. Kino took that as his cue to leave. As soon as Kino was out of earshot, Tatsuya asked Mizuki who Kino was. She told him who he was and explained that he wanted her to join a club with other students who had the same ability as her. That night, Tatsuya and Miyuki visited Master Yakumo, who happened to know a lot about Kino and his family lineage. He let them know that Ajin, Kino's older stepbrother, was the head of the Japanese Blanche branch. He said Kino always did what Hajin asked him to do and warned the siblings to be on the lookout for anything strange during the debate. Elsewhere, in an abandoned building, Mibu and a group of others were given rings by a suspicious person. The next day, the debate took place as planned, with the course 2 students making their grievances known. When it was Mayumi's turn to take the stage, she managed to sway the public's opinion to her side. She let them know that she understood their pain and was willing to fight for their sake. She even promised to ensure that the rule which prevented Course 2 students from joining the student council would be abolished. Just as the students began clapping and cheering for their beloved president, explosions rocked some of the buildings around the auditorium. While the students tried to make sense of what was going on, the students with Blanche CADs tried to leave, but Mary ordered that they be captured. As if there wasn't already enough commotion, a gas bomb was thrown into the building through the window. Thankfully, Hanzo was able to contain it with a spell before throwing it outside. As soon as he did that, a group of men in gas masks forced their way inside and tried to attack. Before they could harm anyone, Mary hit them with a spell which filled their gas mask with nitrogen. With the terrorists inside the building contained, Tatsuya and Miyuki head to the building where the first explosion occurred. When the siblings arrived at the affected building, they found Leo and Erika doing their best to fight off the terrorists, so they joined them. Once all the terrorists were taken care of, Tatsuya explained the situation to their friends. While he was still speaking, Ono arrived and told them that the terrorists were targeting the library. She said the main force had already gone inside, and those who were currently fighting the students were simply a diversion. Ono also let them know that Mibu was part of the group in the library, and begged them to give her a chance. She swore Mibu was just confused as she was finding it hard to deal with the gap between her achievements as a kendoist and her evaluation as a Course 2 student. However, Tatsuya told her he wasn't Tanjiro, so Ono's sob story about Mibu's hardships would make him go easy on her. When the group began heading to the library, they encountered another group of terrorists, so Leo, using his Bucky-inspired CAD, stayed behind to fight them off. Erika wondered out loud if Leo's hulkish way of fighting would destroy his CAD, and Tatsuya assured her that it wouldn't, as Leo had fortified the device. When Tatsuya and the girls arrived at the library, he scanned the building and discovered that Mibu and some of the terrorists were in the special reading room. He also deduced how many enemies they had to face before they could get there, so Erika rushed ahead to clear the path. While she fought off the terrorists, the siblings carried on to the special reading room to confront the others. Inside the reading room, while Mibu watched the terrorists hack into the school's servers to access the classified data stored there, she began to wonder if she was on the right side. Just then, Miyuki broke the door down using her ice powers, and before the terrorists could react, Tatsuya destroyed their recordable cue. One of the terrorists tried to retaliate by shooting Tatsuya, but Miyuki went all Sub-Zero on him by freezing his hand before he could pull the trigger. As the fool nursed his hand, Tatsuya told Mibu that she was being used since it wasn't already clear to her at that point. He told her that the world they lived in wasn't one where she could achieve the equality she so desperately wanted. This made Mibu angry, so she lashed out at Tatsuya and asked if he'd never felt the same way she felt. She said there was no way he'd never been discriminated against by those around him, because his sister was a child prodigy. The moment he said this, Miyuki responded by saying she didn't hold or feel contempt towards her brother. She said even though the world chose to remain ignorant about Tatsuya's abilities, she would never do that. She also told Mibu she felt sorry for her, because she never acknowledged herself for who she was. She said accepting the narrative that she was a weed had blinded her with so much anger that she forgot to see that she was so much more than what the school said she was. Hearing Miyuki's words made Mibu realize she'd been a fool with misplaced priorities all along. However, before her mind could do a complete 360, the terrorists threw a smoke bomb and ordered her to use her cast-jamming ring to stop the siblings from casting spells. Mibu did as they asked, but that didn't stop Tatsuya from beating the idiots up. Mibu managed to escape, and when Miyuki insisted they go after her, Tatsuya told her that Erika would take care of Mibu. Just as Tatsuya predicted, Erika challenged Mibu to a sword fight, which she accepted. In the first round, Mibu tried to slow Erika down by using her cast-jamming ring. but Erika was able to match her strike until she broke the tip of Mainu's weapon. Mibu then decided to get serious, so she picked up the katana Erika had given to her before and got rid of her ring. Channeling her inner Zoro, Mibu faced off against Erika, who proved she was the next Dracula Mihawk by defeating her easily. Meanwhile, Kano was trying to make his escape when Kaotoro and Midori caught him and took him into custody. Later that day, while the police rounded up the terrorists, an injured Mibu sat on a bed in the clinic and told her story. She said Kano had been rallying the Kendo club members to join him in his fight against discrimination by magic. She hadn't thought much of his preaching until she was made to feel insignificant by Mary. Mary, who had no recollection of the incident, asked Mibu to explain. So Mibu told her that she had once asked her to be her sparring partner, but she coldly brushed her off. According to Mibu, Mary had told her she wasn't worthy of fighting her and advised her to find someone else to spar with. However, Mary denied saying those words to Mibu and told everyone that she declined Mibu's request to spar with her because she didn't think she could measure up to Mibu, making Mibu realize that she'd misunderstood Mary. She soon began weeping and said she'd wasted an entire year resenting Mary and feeding her inferiority complex because of a simple misunderstanding. Tatsuya assured her that the year hadn't been a waste because she took time out to polish her skills. This just made Mibu sob harder, and she held onto his shirt as she did so. When she finally calmed down, Tatsuya announced that he was going to hunt down the remaining Blanche operatives. Miyuki, Erika, Leo, and Jumanji, who felt responsible for them, insisted on going with him. Tatsuya agreed to let them come along, so Miyuki asked how they would locate the Blanche operatives since no one knew where their hideout was. Tatsuya said he knew someone who could tell them, and then opened the clinic door to reveal Miss Ono. She let them know that Blanche's headquarters was in an old abandoned factory, so they made plans on how to get there. Before the low-budget Suicide Squad headed out for their mission, Kurihara begged Jumanji to let him join them. He said he'd been listening in on their conversation and felt it was his duty to fight for Mibu's honor. He admitted that he had always admired Mibu's swordsmanship, but along the line, he noticed her sword became clouded, so he wanted to find the person who made it so. His explanation was enough for Jumanji, so he told Kurihara he could join them. On their way to the hideout, Tatsuya told each of them what their role during the operation would be. After breaking into the compound with their vehicle, Tatsuya and Miyuki headed inside the building as planned. Once they were inside, Tatsuya used elemental sight to determine how many enemies awaited them behind the door. As the siblings entered the room and were welcomed by Hajime, Tatsuya suggested Hajime and his goons surrender, but Hajime ignored his suggestion and invited Tatsuya to join their group instead. Of course, Tatsuya refused his invitation as he didn't think he would look good in an orange jumper. Hajime had expected Tatsuya's refusal, so he pulled out his trump card and tried to hypnotize Tatsuya into joining his group. Unfortunately for him, Tatsuya was strong-willed and therefore was able to resist his hypnosis. Tatsuya then asked Hajime if he used his pathetic parlor trick to replace Mibu's memories. Realizing that the ability he relied on so much was now as useless as your ex, Hajime ordered his men to open fire. Before they could do so, Tatsuya destroyed their weapons with his silver horn. Terrified, Hajime fled, so Miyuki asked Tatsuya to go after him and assured him that she could handle the small fries on her own. When he tried to do so, one of the men attempted to stab him, so Miyuki turned him into an ice sculpture. Tatsuya then went ahead, leaving Miyuki to make more Christmas ornaments out of the rest of the men. Meanwhile, Kurihara and Jumanji were busy taking out the rest of the Blanche members in the facility. When Tatsuya finally located the almighty king of cowards, he walked into the room to confront him. However, Hajime and his men surrounded him as they performed cast jamming, hoping to render his CAD useless. Seeing the cast jamming rings and bracelet made Tatsuya realize who Hajime's sponsors were when he pointed it out and mentioned them. Hajime's eyes became as wide as flying saucers, after which he ordered his men to take Tatsuya out. Without batting an eye, Tatsuya used his silver horn to incapacitate the men just as Kurihara cut the door open. Hajime backed away in fear, and when Kurihara noticed him, he cut his arm off as punishment for manipulating Mibu. Thankfully, Jumanji arrived just then and stopped the bleeding with a spell, preventing him from bleeding to death. Soon after, the police arrived, and they took over the operation while Tatsuya and the others watched on. The next day, Tatsuya visited Mibu at the hospital, and she informed him that she had to stay a little bit longer at the hospital. This was because they wanted to observe her and make sure none of her other memories had been tampered with. Tatsuya told her that Kano was also in the hospital as he was in the same boat as she was. He added that none of the students who participated in the attack would be punished since the school didn't want their accountability to be questioned. Before leaving, he promised to come see her on the day she would be discharged. True to his word, Tatsuya showed up at the hospital with Miyuki and Erika on the day Mibu was discharged. They found her chatting happily with Kirihara, who Erika said had been visiting Mibu every day at the hospital. After they got closer to Mibu and congratulated her on her release from the hospital, Mibu's father called Tatsuya aside. He thanked him for saving his daughter's life, but Tatsuya refused to take credit for it. Mibu's father then pointed out that Tatsuya was the same way his old friend Major Kazama had said he was. Tatsuya was surprised by this revelation, but Mibu's father assured him that he wouldn't breathe a word of what he knew to anyone. After their conversation, Tatsuya joined his friends, and after watching Erika tease Mibu and Kirihara for a while, the siblings took their leave. Meanwhile, at the third magic high school, a student Masaki had just completed a bloody training session when his friend Shinkaro came to find him. While they took a shower, Shinkaro told him about the terrorist attack on the first high school. Masaki said he was sure the terrorists were the only ones who got injured during the attack because he knew how capable the first magic high school students were. However, Shinkaro pointed out that no matter how skilled they were, they could never measure up to Masaki, who was nicknamed the Crimson Prince. A few nights later, while Miyuki trained with Master Yakumo, Tatsuya sensed a presence, and when the intruder stepped out of the shadows, Tatsuya was surprised to see Miss Ono. Master Yakumo explained that she was one of his students, and she apologized for interrupting their training session. She then asked Miyuki if she was going to participate in the 9 schools competition, which was simply an inter-school event between the 9 magic schools. Miyuki told her yes and said she would be participating in 2 events, which Ono thought was impressive. Tatsuya, who was still interested in knowing the reason Ono had shown up at the dojo so late at night, asked Ono why she had come. Master Yakumo explained that Ono was an undercover cop and asked that they keep her secret. Tatsuya promised to keep his mouth on the condition that she share any terrorist plots she discovers with him, and Ono agreed. At school the next day, Tatsuya's class competed against another class in a game of advanced football, which they won. When the game was over, Tatsuya and Leo approached a classmate named Makiko. Makiko told them that he'd been hoping for an opportunity to speak with them as he'd never seen anyone who could stand Erika. From the way he spoke, Tatsuya deduced he was well acquainted with Erika, so he asked what their relationship was. Before Makiko could respond, Erika, who had just arrived with Mizuki, said they were childhood friends. When the boys turned their attention to her, they discovered that her shorts were like underwear. Erika told them there was nothing wrong with her shorts, but Leo told her that they made her look like a broke-ass baddie, which earned him a kick in the safe zone. Later that day, during lunch, Mayumi told everyone that all the athletes for the upcoming 9 school games had been selected. However, they were short on engineers, which was a big problem for the team. Azusa then suggested that Tatsuya join the engineering team, since he was familiar with fine-tuning CADs. Tatsuya told them he couldn't join the team because the athletes who were all Course 2 students would never trust him with their CADs. However, when Miyuki said she didn't want anyone other than him to fine-tune her CAD, he changed his mind. Later that day, during a briefing with the athletes and engineering team, Mayumi informed them that Tatsuya would be joining them as an engineer. Just as he'd predicted, some of the athletes weren't on board with the idea and questioned his skills. Juwanji assured them that Tatsuya's skills were top-notch and even offered to let Tatsuya fine-tune his CAD to prove it. Still, they refused, so Mayumi offered to use her CAD for the test, since she was the one who brought Tatsuya to the team. Kirihara told her she didn't have to do that and insisted that they use his CAD instead. While Tatsuya worked on adjusting Kirihara's CAD, the athletes mocked him for using the keyboard, which they considered old school. However, Ki, another athlete, thought Tatsuya was impressive, and when Tatsuya was done with the CAD, Kirihara gave it a test run. Even though he let the others know that his CAD was working perfectly, some of them still had their doubts about Tatsuya joining the team. Thankfully, the majority of the team, including Hanzo, agreed that Tatsuya would be a great addition to the team. That night, Tatsuya got a call from Major Kazama, and during their conversation, it was revealed that Tatsuya was a special officer working for the military. Kazama informed Tatsuya that they had just finished overhauling something called the Third Eye. He requested that Tatsuya find time to return to base so he could update the software and run some functionality tests on it. Tatsuya agreed and said he would head to the facility the following morning to check things on. As their conversation progressed, Kazama warned Tatsuya to be vigilant during the 9 schools competition. He said members of an international crime syndicate had been spotted in the area and they believed the syndicate was targeting the competition. Kazama said he had Mibu's father look into the syndicate, and he discovered they were a Hong Kong syndicate known as No Head Dragon. A few hours later, Miyuki dropped by Tatsuya's office to bring him some tea. He then took the chance to show her the flying device he just perfected and asked that she give it a try. Miyuki praised her brother for being a genius and agreed to give the new device a test run. Miyuki flew a few meters off the ground, doing a few twists and turns in the air, after which she told him that the device worked perfectly. The next morning, the siblings visited the FLT Development Center and were greeted warmly by everyone including the chief. Tatsuya apologized for dropping by without calling ahead, but the chief reminded him that he was Taurus Silver, their boss. He then asked why they had come and Tatsuya showed him the prototype for the new flying device. Immediately, the chief ordered his subordinates to prepare for a test run, which they carried out without any problems. Inside the control room, after the scientists confirmed the device was working well, they all cheered and praised Tatsuya's skills. On their way out, the siblings met their father and a fellow named Mr. Oki, who happened to be the Jatsuba family's very own Alfred Pennyworth. Oki greeted Miyuki warmly but ignored Tatsuya, and when Miyuki complained about it, he said there was no way he'd acknowledge the presence of a mere bodyguard. Miyuki argued that he was her brother, but Oki ignored what she said and began blabbering about how Tatsuya was only a Tony Stark ripoff with a sprinkle of Doctor Strange. This pissed Miyuki off, and if Tatsuya hadn't calmed her down, she would have gone all Elsa on his ass and let it go. Tatsuya then reminded the stupid old fool that his mother was the former head of the Jatsuba clan, and calling him a wannabe magician was an insult to both his mother and his aunt. Just then their father, who had been quiet all along, cut in and asked Tatsuya not to speak ill of his mother, even though he hated her. Tatsuya just guided Miyuki to the door, and before walking out told his father he didn't hate his mother. Later on at school, all the athletes in the engineering team were introduced to the students. They all received badges which Miyuki had the honor of pinning to their blazers. After school that day, Tatsuya held a meeting with the first-year female athletes. He told them he was going to be in charge of fine-tuning their CADs, creating their training regimens and providing them with strategic support. Days before the competition was scheduled to begin, Mizuki was watching Tatsuya's training session with the athletes when something caught her attention. When she took off her glasses to inspect them properly, she was hit by a strong wave of energy, so she decided to find its source. Upon getting there, she found Charmcaster, Mikihiko performing spirit magic. Mikihiko sensed her presence and freaked out, causing him to lose control of the spirits. Fortunately, John Constantine, or should I say Tatsuya, arrived in the nick of time. Tatsuya called out to him, asking him to calm down. When Mikihiko snapped out of the daze he was in, he apologized for what happened, but Tatsuya said Mizuki was to blame for disturbing his concentration. He then asked Mikihiko if the spell he'd been performing was ancient spirit magic, and Mikihiko told him yes. He explained that he was using the remnants of Sokka's water tribe girlfriend to practice his summoning magic. Tatsuya found it intriguing, so he asked Mizuki what the spirits had looked like to her, and she said they each had different shades of blue. Hearing this made Mikihiko move closer to Mizuki and stare directly into her eyes until Tatsuya pointed out that it was making the poor girl uncomfortable. Mikihiko backed away and apologized for his behavior, after which he said that Mizuki might possess the crystal eyes he'd been searching for. Curious, Tatsuya asked him to explain what the crystal eyes were, and he said those who possessed crystal eyes were the only ones who could see the true nature of spirits. This made Tatsuya say Mizuki was a valuable asset for spirit magic users, and Mikihiko confirmed it. However, he assured them that he wouldn't tell anyone about her abilities and would not force her into helping him with his summoning. A few days later, the athletes set out on the journey to the place where the competition was to be held. An hour after they embarked on the journey, a final destination-inspired accident occurred. The driver of a smaller car lost control after one of his tires burst, causing the car to tumble towards the athletes' bus. The bus driver managed to skid to a stop as the car made its way towards them, so the terrified students attempted to stop the car by casting spells at the same time. Mary and Mayumi ordered them to stop because if they all cast their spells at the same time, a cast jamming would occur. Mary then asked Jumani to cast a spell to slow the car down, and Miyuki offered to put out the fire. As soon as the flames were put out, Jumanji set up a barrier to stop the car from colliding with their bus. A little while after the police came to inspect the accident site, the students were allowed to head to their hotel. As they disembarked, Hanzo admitted to Kirihara that his man ego was bruised because he hadn't been able to help with the accident earlier. Kirihara told him that in some situations the best action to take was no action at all, but Hanzo didn't agree with him. He pointed out that Miyuki had acted swiftly and said he was no match for her abilities. Kirihara told him not to feel disheartened because the Shiba siblings were not ordinary. Meanwhile, Tatsuya and Miyuki, who were unaware that they were the topic of discussion between Hanzo and Kirihara, talked about the accident. Tatsuya told his sister that the accident had been planned and that the driver had used 3 high-level spells designed to conceal the presence of Shen after it had been cast. This left Miyuki feeling worried, but her brother assured her that things would be fine. When they stepped into the hotel lobby, they spotted Erika, so Miyuki stopped to speak with her. Tatsuya excused himself because he had a meeting with the other engineers, and as soon as he left, Mizuki showed up. Later that evening during the welcome banquet, Honoka and Shizuku approached the siblings and told Miyuki that the other athletes wanted to hang out with her. The only reason they hadn't approached her was because she was sticking to Tatsuya like glue, and they wanted nothing to do with him. Just then, Kanon and Kai approached them, and Kanon said the others were a bunch of idiots for avoiding Tatsuya. Ki pointed out that their reason had more to do with pride than anything else, so Tatsuya suggested that Miyuki go mingle with the others. Miyuki agreed, although unenthusiastically, and after she walked away with Honoka and Shizuku, Kanon and Ki also walked away. While Miyuki did her best to mingle with the others, she was unaware that Masaki couldn't take his eyes off her. Shinkaro was kind enough to tell him everything he knew about Miyuki, because it was the first time he'd seen his friend interested in a girl. A little while later, a speaker called their attention to the stage and introduced the chairman of the Magic Association to the students. Surprisingly, the person who took the stage was a woman, but Tatsuya was able to sense the chairman, who had concealed his presence and was standing behind the woman. When the woman finally walked away, the chairman took her spot and gave Tatsuya a nod before addressing the audience. He told them that only 5 people in the room had sensed his presence before he revealed himself. He added that if he was a terrorist intending to cause them harm, only those 5 people would have been able to stop him. He then went ahead to give them a speech on how it was good for them to work on improving their magical skills. Later that night, Mikiko was outside practicing his spirit magic when he sensed people lurking about. His first instinct was to inform the security team about it because he wasn't confident in his ability. However, when he recalled how Tatsuya always faced challenges head-on, he changed his mind and rushed toward the intruders. When he located them, he tossed 3 Bakugan cards in their direction, hoping to stop them. The men noticed the card and were about to open fire on Mikiko when their guns fell apart. Mikiko's floating cards hit them with some powerful electricity currents. Mikiko wondered who had helped him disarm the men. Just then, Tatsuya emerged from the shadows like Batman on a dark Gotham night and explained that he'd been on his way to his room when he sensed trouble. He then went to check on the intruders and commended Mikiko for taking them out without fatally hurting them once he confirmed that they still had a pulse. However, Mikihiro didn't believe what he'd done was commendable, because if Tatsuya hadn't saved him, he'd already be sipping tea with Gojo and the others in the afterlife. Tatsuya simply called him a dim-witted fool and told him to stop discrediting himself because he was almost as good as Houdini himself. He then gave Mikiko advice on how to make his spells work better, after which he asked him to inform security about the intruders. The next day, the competition began, and the first Magic High School hoped they could retain their title as the winners. The first event was the women's battle board qualifiers, which Mary took part in. When the match began, one of the contests tried to slow the others. Fortunately, Mary was a pro surfer and was able to stay on her board. As she carried on, Tatsuya noted that she was fortifying herself to maintain her balance on the board while multicasting 3 to 4 spells at the same time. Tatsuya explained her strategy to the others and told them it was a good one just as she crossed the finish line, securing victory for herself. After the match, Tatsuya met with Kazama and some high-ranking military officers to discuss the intruders he and Mikiko apprehended the previous night. Kazama confirmed that the men were part of the No-Heads Dragon Syndicate and said they were yet to uncover their reasons for being in the area. However, they advised him to be vigilant as they suspected the Syndicate was targeting the tournament. Later that afternoon, Tatsuya joined the others at the arena to watch Mayumi participate in the speed shooting event. They cheered her on as the game began, and just as they expected, she did excellently well, claiming first place for their school. The next day, Tatsuya was working on a CAD program when Mayumi approached him. She asked him to help with her stretches since her match would begin soon, so he agreed. When she was done, Tatsuya told her that he had to go check on the other athletes. However, before he could go, Izumi, one of the other engineers, arrived and told him to stay with Mayumi. She said she could handle the other athletes' CADs on her own, and then walked away. Listening to her advice, Tatsuya stayed back to watch Mayumi's crowdball match, which she won. Later that day, Kanon participated in the women's pillar break, even and Tatsuya was there to watch the game. She dominated the match by using a vibration spell, which caused the pillars to collapse despite her opponent's efforts to defend them. After the match, Tatsuya, Kanon, Ki, and Shizuku went to the engineering tent. Suzin informed them that because they lost most of the male events, their chances of emerging overall best were very slim. According to her calculations, both the male and female teams had to win at least 4 out of the remaining official matches for them to retain their title. That evening, just as Tatsuya returned to his room with a package from the FLT chief, Miyuki and their friends came to hang out with him. Erika was the first to notice the package, and after opening it to see what was inside, she asked Tatsuya if it was a weaponized integrated CAD. Tatsuya said it was and then tossed the case to Leo, who he asked to take it for a test run. Leo was happy to try out the new toy, so we went to one of the training grounds behind the hotel to test the CAD with Tatsuya. When Leo activated the weapon, it detached, so Tatsuya explained how the device was able to function as a whole sword. He then asked Leo to test out the sword on some straw dummies, which he completely dismembered. The next day, the events continued with the women's battle board event. However, unlike the last time when Mary dominated the match, there was an accident involving her and the 7th high school contestant. The girl happened to over-accelerate at a sharp bend, causing her to lose balance and collide with Mary. When Mary woke up later at the hospital, Mayumi informed her that her ribs had been affected. However, unlike Humpty Dumpty, who couldn't be put back together, the doctors had managed to reconnect her ribs. She also told Mary that she had to drop out of the Mirage bat game because she required at least 10 days to fully recover from her injuries. Mary then asked about the 7th school contestant, and Mayumi said that she suffered minimal injuries because she saved her. Mayumi also told Mary that they suspected a third party had used magic to make her lose balance before she caught the girl from 7th High. This prompted Mary to tell her that she felt the water swaying unnaturally just before her board sank. Mayumi said Tatsuya had noticed the surface of the water fluctuating unnaturally after Mary lost balance, so he had borrowed the videos of the match from the staff to go through them. In Tatsuya's hotel room, he went through the video he obtained from the tournament staff. After watching the video, Tatsuya revealed that what happened to the 7th school's contestant was planned to knock Mary off her board. He pulled up a simulation of the course and showed them the area where the accident occurred. Tapping into his inner Sherlock Holmes, Tatsuya explained that all the contestants knew they were to slow down when they approached that curve, but for some reason, the girl didn't. Tatsuya suspected that her CAD had been tampered with so that instead of decelerating, she would accelerate instead. When the others asked who could have done such a thing, Tatsuya said it had to be one of the tournament staff. Miyuki didn't think it was possible as each school had their CADs under lock and key at all times. Tatsuya assured her that it was because, at some point during the tournament, all CADs were handed over to the tournament staff. Later that night, the siblings were summoned to a meeting with the student council officials. During the meeting, they told Miyuki that she would replace Mary in the Mirage Bat event. Miyuki didn't think she was the right person to take Mary's place in the event, but Mary knew she had what it took to win. The next day, during the rookie speed shooting match, Shizuku turned the entire area into her magic activation zone thanks to her CAD, which allowed her to shoot down her targets with precision. Mayumi and the others watching were left in awe as they hadn't expected Tatsuya's engineering skills to be that good. After leaving the arena, Mayumi, Mary, Jumanji, and Suzin all returned to their tent to look at the scoreboards. They noted that all the first-year female athletes won their events, but they still had to put in more effort if they wished to come out on top. A few days later, Tatsuya rushed to meet up with Shizuku for some last-minute fine-tuning. When he was done, Shizuku promised him that she would do justice to his device by winning her match. Just as she promised, Shizuku wiped the floor with her opponent. proving that she was an excellent marksman, just like her mentor, Alucard. After the match, Mayumi praised Tatsuya for the excellent job he'd done on Shizuku's CAD. Mayumi then went ahead to congratulate Shizuku and the other girls who also won their games. Mary tried to convince Tatsuya to take credit for his role in their victory, but he refused. Even when Suzanne informed them that the Magic University Board wished to adopt Shizuku's finishing move as part of their index, Tatsuya asked them not to include his name as the developer. Shizuku begged him to have his name written down as the developer, but he refused. Meanwhile, the third Magic High School students were in a meeting and they discussed the first high school's recent wins. Masaki told his teammates that the reason they won was because they had a top-notch engineer in their team. He referred to Shizuku's device and Shinkaro explained that it was a model which was unveiled the previous summer. However, the device had some issues and wasn't ready to be used yet. This revelation surprised the others, but Masaki remained calm as he said all they had to do was find out which engineer was in charge of adjusting Shizuku's CAD. Later that day, Honoka begged Tatsuya to take a look at her CAD because she was scheduled to participate in the Rookie Battle Board event. Tatsuya told her he couldn't as it would seem like he was undermining Azusa's efforts, but he agreed to come up with a new strategy for her. When the match began, Honoka slowed her opponents down by casting an optical spell on the water's surface. The light emitted by the spell was by far brighter than X's future, and it helped Honoka claim the top spot. As soon as she cleared the finish line, she rushed towards Tatsuya happily and thanked him. She also sobbed like a baby as she told him that it was the first time she ever won a match. Elsewhere, a group of men, who turned out to be the leaders of the No-Head Dragon Syndicate, met. They discussed the ongoing tournament and said if they didn't find a way to ensure that the third Magic High School won the tournament, they would be in a lot of trouble. It turned out that every unfortunate incident that the first Magic High School students had encountered was their doing, and they were prepared to do worse things. That night, Miyuki waited in Tatsuya's room until he got back so she could ask if he'd refused to have his name written in the university's index as a developer because of their aunt. Tatsuya told her yes, which made her sad, but he assured her that everything would be fine. He said he was going to do everything in his power to bring their aunt down, but he had to become stronger first by making a name for himself. Miyuki then hugged her brother, promising to remain at his side no matter the outcome of his plan. The next day, Shizuku took part in the Rookie Pillar Break event. During the match, she showed her opponent no mercy and destroyed her self-esteem along with the pillars. Soon after Shizuku's match, it was Miyuki's turn to participate in her first pillar match. So Mayumi, Mary, Kanon, and Ki came to wish her luck and watch her match. When she took her position in the arena, she showed her opponent no mercy by casting an Inferno spell, which melted her ice pillars. Once they had melted to a certain extent, she used her ice powers to destroy the pillars and claim victory. That night, during a small banquet, Tatsuya found himself surrounded by a group of adoring fans. They praised him and attributed most of their wins to his flawless engineering skills. Meanwhile, Shun watched Tatsuya with so much hate that he eventually got fed up and stormed out of the room. His friends went after him to ask what the matter was, and he told them that no matter what happened, they had to win their Monolith code match. He said winning was the only way to prove once and for all that blooms were superior to weeds. The next day, Tatsuya and Miyuki ran into Masaki and Shinkaro on their way to the arena, so the boys introduced themselves to the siblings. Tatsuya asked what they wanted from him, so Shinkaro told him they were curious to find out what he looked like. Masaki added that their curiosity stemmed from the fact that they learned he was the super engineer responsible for the first high school's recent wins. Tatsuya thanked them for acknowledging his skills, but told them it was rude to stop him in the middle of the hallway. He then instructed Miyuki to go get ready for a match, so she took her leave. As she walked past Masaki, he couldn't help but stare at her, but quickly averted his gaze so he would be mistaken for a simp in training. His longing gaze wasn't missed by Tatsuya, who told the Crimson Prince to take his scrawny-looking ass over to the arena for his match. Before they parted ways, Shinkaro told Tatsuya that they would participate in the Monolith code match. Tatsuya wished them luck and said he wasn't the engineer in charge of that match, so Shinkaro told him they would look forward to the day they could go up against his players. Later on, during the quarter-final match for the Rookie Battle Board game, Erika noticed all the contestants putting on shades. Mikiko said it was probably because they didn't want to be caught off again by Honoka and her like show. Erika said they were all bone-dead stupid if they believed Honoka would make use of the same trick twice. When the match began, Mikiko noticed that all the other contestants avoided the dark areas because Honoka had cast an illusion spell on the arena. Her spell, aided by the dark shades the athletes wore, made them believe the water route ended at the border between the dark and light areas. This made them slow down so many times, allowing Hanoka to zoom ahead to the finish line. That afternoon, Mayumi summoned Tatsuya, Miyuki, Shizuku, and Aimi to the conference room they used. She congratulated the girls on reaching the final round of the Rookie Pillar Break event, and told them that the tournament staff had approached them with a proposal. She said they were willing to cancel the finals and have all 3 girls share first place if they wanted it. Aimi said she was going to withdraw, but Shizuku and Miyuki both said they wanted to compete. The next day, both girls faced off against each other, and Shizuku was determined to give it her best. However, while Miyuki's Inferno spell was melting her ice pillars, Shizuku noticed that her attack didn't make a dent in any of Miyuki's pillars. This prompted her to pull out a second CAD and fire a high-level spell called Phonon Master at the pillars. Mayumi was surprised to see Shizuku using such a spell, but Miyuki wasn't fazed and retaliated by using Neflemi, a wide Range freezing magic spell that could create liquid nitrogen. Miyuki set fire to the pillars, causing them to explode. That evening, Hanoka found a sad Shizuku sitting alone in their room. Feeling bad for her friend, she pulled her in for a hug, and Shizuku admitted she felt bitter over the fact that she lost. She had known from the beginning that she was no match for Miyuki, but she still wanted to give it a shot. She knew Shizuku had her strengths, so she diffused the situation by suggesting they get some tea. Meanwhile, Tatsuya had already retired to his room, and as he lay on his bed, his mind wandered to Masaki and Shinkaro. From what he could recall, Masaki was more or less a subtle ripoff of Robi Luxi. 3 years ago, Masaki volunteered as a soldier to help defend the country when the new Soviet Union invaded. During his time at the front lines, he had used rapture magic to mercilessly massacre the enemy's forces and earned the name Crimson Prince. Shinkaro was an Einstein in the making because, at a very young age, he'd identified one of the cardinal codes, thought to only exist in theory. These 2 boys were the perfect combination of brains and brawn, and Tatsuya almost felt sorry for Shun, who had to go up against them in the Monolith code match. The next day, when Tatsuya got to the engineering tent, Miyuki and Shizuku rushed over to him and informed him that there had been an accident. The rookie Monolith code team had been buried under the rubble of an old building during their match. However, Shizuku didn't believe it had been an accident and said it was a deliberate attack. Mayumi told her not to make speculations as they didn't have proof to back up her claims, so Tatsuya asked how the team was doing. She told him they were critically injured and were already receiving treatment at the hospital. She also said that if they didn't find replacements soon, they would have to forfeit the match. However, Jumanji was handling the situation and would let them know what was decided by the committee. She then smiled at Tatsuya and told him she wanted to speak with him about something important. When they were alone, she asked if their school's team was being targeted on purpose because someone wanted payback. Tatsuya decided to come clean, so he told her about the No-Head Dragon Syndicate and the moves they were making in the tournament. Hearing this made her realize Tatsuya was involved in something dangerous, so she advised him to be careful. Meanwhile, the No-Head Dragon's leaders were in another meeting, and the croony old goats expressed their joy at what happened to the first high school team. The following day, during the rookie Mirage battle match, Azusa overheated some of the engineers from other schools, saying that the activation sequence the first high athletes were making use of was similar to that of Taurus Silver. That triggered her brain to realize the connection between Tatsuya and Taurus Silver, leaving her speechless. Later on, Tatsuya was summoned by Mayumi to one of their meetings. When he arrived, she thanked him for a job well done and then asked if he could participate in the rookie Monolith code match. Tatsuya refused, saying that the other athletes wouldn't be happy if a Course 2 student represented them. However, Jumanji told him it didn't matter as he was already a part of their team. He asked him not to use the excuse of being a Course 2 student to back out of the match when they all knew he was capable of winning. This made Tatsuya change his mind, but he told them he'd only participate if they let Leo and Mikihiko be his teammates. Jumanji said there was no problem with his request. Eventually, the other officials agreed to let Tatsuya have his way, since he was the only one who could help boost their points would be fine, since he would be the one to fine-tune their CAD. He also gave them a crash course in how the game was played and came up with the formation they were to use. Leo would defend the Monolith, Mikihiko would act as both offense and defense, while he would be the vanguard. The next day, the new team participated in their first match, and Tatsuya got to show off his skills. He charged towards the opposing team's Monolith guns blazing like Rambo. He'd easily immobilized and disarmed his opponent before he unlocked their Monolith. At his team's Monolith, Leo took out the boy who tried to sneak up on him and unlocked the Monolith. Meanwhile, Mikihiko released some Shen waves that left the last opponent feeling dizzy and disoriented. This allowed Tatsuya to lure him out and knock him out with similar waves. After the match, everyone cheered for the flawless victory Tatsuya's team had won, but Masaki asked Shinkaro what he thought of Tatsuya's gameplay. Shinkaro said Tatsuya had good combat skills but struggled with magic, and that was the one advantage they had over him. He was sure they would be victorious if they could avoid all of Tatsuya's traps in the arena. For Tatsuya's next match, they went full special ops and easily took down their opponents. The next day, the third high school team participated in the Monolith Code semifinals with Masaki and Shinkaro on the team. Masaki proved their opponents were no match for him as he casually walked towards them. They fired spells at him, but none were able to penetrate through his barrier. They tried using rocks, but Masaki destroyed those as well before he completely obliterated them. Soon after the third high school matched, Tatsuya and his team returned to the field for another match which they won. That evening after the match, Miss Ono delivered a package to Tatsuya from Master Yakumo, and before she left, he asked her to find out where the no-head dragon's base was located. The next day, before the final match, Tatsuya gave Leo and Mikihiko robes with magic circles inscribed on them. It explained that the robes could enhance the potency of the wearer's magic, and it would help them avoid getting hit by Shinkaro's invincible bullets. When he was done speaking, a worried Mayumi asked Tatsuya if he'd be fine going toe-to-toe with Masaki. Hanzo also asked if he had some strategy in place to improve his chances. Tatsuya admitted that on a normal day, he would be no match for Masaki, however, since Masaki had an obsession with him. He planned to force him into a close combat situation. This made Kurihara point out that the use of physical force was prohibited, but Tatsuya assured him that he knew what he was doing. When it was time for the match, Leo and Mikihiko felt self-conscious wearing their robes. On the other side, Masaki told Shinkaro that the robes might be a countermeasure against his invincible bullets. However, he assured his friend that a piece of cloth was no threat to their victory. Meanwhile, the chairman of the Magic Association had joined the other officials in the viewing box. When they asked why he'd graced them with his presence, he told them he found someone intriguing among the players. Finally, the buzzer went off, signaling the start of the match, and as expected, Masaki and Tatsuya went band for band, or in their case, spell for spell. Both boys slowly approached each other as they shot spells, hoping to slow the other down, but they were evenly matched. However, when Tatsuya was almost hit by one of Masaki's spells, he changed tactics. Making use of his observation haki, Tatsuya was able to detect where Masaki's spells would appear. The only ones aware of what Tatsuya had done were Kyuko and Kasu. But Kyuko thought it would have been better if Tatsuya made use of his sixth sense. Back in the arena, Shinkaro made a play for the Monolith Leo and Mikihiko were guarding. When he attempted to use his invisible bullet, Leo blocked his line of sight with the robe. Mikihiko then attacked him with another spell, so Shinkaro quickly jumped out of the way to avoid it. When he came back down, he prepared another attack, but Mikihiko made use of his cloning jutsu. This allowed Leo to attack with his detachable device, but before he could land a hit, Masaki shot at him. Mikihiko tried to retaliate, but Shinkaro used some kind of gravity spell to pin him to the ground before he could react. Masaki turned his attention back to Tatsuya, only to find him charging at him. Immediately, he fired a spell to slow him down, but because he miscalculated, the spell was too strong. Tatsuya was able to counter most of it, but eventually he was struck down, causing everyone, including Masaki, to fear for his life. However, they were unaware that Tatsuya was the reincarnation of Neo and a part of the Matrix, so he had already activated restoration magic. Once his body restoration was completed, he got closer to Masaki and did the Thanos snap in his ear. The result was a loud sound wave that traveled to the bleachers. Inside the control center, Mayumi demanded to know how Tatsuya was still standing after getting hit by Masaki's spell. Shuwanji explained that Tatsuya was well versed in the ancient arts of ninjutsu and had strengthened his body to avoid getting hurt. Back in the arena, Shinkaro panicked when he realized Masaki had lost, but regained his composure in time to steel himself against Mikihiko's attack. Unfortunately, he was unable to avoid it and got struck down by the lighting spell. The final member of their team attempted to take revenge on Mikihiko, but Captain America, Leo stepped in. With all members of the opposing team down, Tatsuya's team was declared the winner of the match. It didn't take long for the news to reach the higher-ups of the No-Head Dragon, and they were not happy with it. Since they weren't ready to lose, they decided to force the first high school athletes to drop out of the Mirage bat game. On the day of the game, Masaki noticed their athlete's CAD glitch right before the athlete lost control and nearly fell to her death. After the girl was carried away by the medical team, Masaki called Tatsuya and told him what she saw. Tatsuya thanked her, and after getting off the phone, he asked Miyuki to prepare for her match. However, he took her CAD with him to have it checked out by the tournament staff as per the rules. While the staff was checking the CAD, Tatsuya noticed he had added a different program to it. Immediately, he grabbed him by the collar and threw him to the floor as he demanded to know what he'd done to the CAD. Just then, the chairman arrived and asked what all the commotion was about. Tatsuya explained the situation and handed Miyuki's CAD to him to inspect it. The old man gave it a once-over and said it had been injected with a program called Golden Electron Silkworm. He said the program had a delayed activation sequence which caused CADs to malfunction. After his explanation, he ordered that the staff member be taken into custody. A few hours later, Tatsuya watched as Miyuki dominated the Mirage bat game and came out on top by the end of the first round. Before the second round began, Miyuki asked Tatsuya if she could use her secret move, and he told her yes. When the buzzer signaling the start of the second round went off, Miyuki waited for a while before activating the flying device she was holding, and when he took to the skies, everyone was shocked. Miyuki happily flew around hitting all the balls until the game ended. Meanwhile, the No-Heads higher-ups had been informed that their plan to sabotage the game was ruined. As expected, they were livid and decided that the only way to prevent the first high school from winning the tournament was to get it cancelled. Since they had modified humans known as generators under their command, they decided to use them to cause chaos. They ordered the generator they had sent to the arena to eliminate at least half of the students gathered in the arena. Fortunately, when the low-budget Terminator attempted to carry out his orders, he was stopped by some special military operatives. The following day, Miyuki participated in the Mirage Bat Finals, and she along with everyone else was surprised to see the other athletes using the flying device. Tatsuya had explained to Mayumi that the other schools complained that Miyuki had cheated, so the committee ordered him to submit her CAD for review. He said they had most likely leaked the flying spell sequence to the other teams to avoid any more conflict. However, he wasn't worried as he knew that no one aside from Miyuki could make use of the flying spell for long. True to his words, the other athletes dropped out of the game because of exhaustion and Miyuki emerged the winner. That night, while Miyuki and the rest of their team celebrated Miyuki's victory, Tatsuya met with Miss Ono. She gave him the coordinates to the No-Heads Dragon base and also gave him a list of all the top members. When she drove away, he got into another car where Ryuko was waiting for him, and he directed her to the hideout. Meanwhile, the chairman of the Magic Committee paid a visit to Major Kazama to discuss Tatsuya. The old man told him he was aware of Tatsuya's lineage, but stated that they were letting his talents go to waste. He said if Tatsuya and Masaki were to team up, they would become an unstoppable force and an asset to the country. Kazama assured him that Tatsuya's talents weren't going to waste as he was their best operative. He even told the old geezer that Masaki was a baby compared to Tatsuya. Kazama knew that what the chairman fired the most was the Jotsuba clan using Tatsuya as their secret weapon to become more powerful than the 10 master clans. He let him know that Tatsuya was loyal to the military and would never think of betraying them. At the No-Heads Dragon hideout, the higher-ups were informed that Tatsuya was the one who disrupted their plans. Unfortunately, they had no idea who he was or what his affiliations were, and it troubled them. Suddenly, one of their bodyguards was shot down by Tatsuya, who was far away in another building. All the lights in the room went out, and the only telephone in the room rang out. When they answered it, Tatsuya told them he was going to repay the favor for all they had done for his team during the tournament. Before they could react, he shot another person, so they all scrambled for cover and asked the generators where Tatsuya was gunning them down. One of the men who resembled an overly stuffed pig tried to shoot Tatsuya down. Unfortunately, he was no deadshot and got hit in the eye by one of Tatsuya's bullets. He screamed at the generators to go after Tatsuya, but they told him that they couldn't. Hoping he would spare them, one of the men tried to pull a talk no jutsu. He promised Tatsuya that he would speak to their boss and convince him to take their organization out of Japan and never return. This prompted Tatsuya to ask what the name of their boss was, since the man was the only one in the room who knew him. The man told him their boss was known as Sun Gongming to the public, and Tatsuya thanked him before getting rid of him and the rest of the people in the room. The next day, Tatsuya met with Kazama and the officers who took down the generator in the arena. They thanked him for the information he obtained about the No-Heads Dragon's leader and said it would help them bring down the Syndicate. Tatsuya asked why the Syndicate was considered high risk, and they told him that the Syndicate doubled as a sorcery booster supplier. The boosters were magic amplifying devices, which the military sought to destroy because they were made from the brains of magicians. They said it was the most inhumane thing a person could do and vowed to destroy their operations. Meanwhile, Jumanji met with Mayumi in the conference room before his Monolith battle match. Mayumi told him that the 10 master clans felt threatened by Tatsuya's power. As a representative of the 10 master clans, she didn't think Tatsuya was bad, but she also wished he had the blood of one of the clans, so they wouldn't try to hurt him. Jumanji told her not to worry as he would find a way to protect Tatsuya if the need arose. He then went on to participate in his match and win it, securing the overall first place for the first high school in the tournament. After the award ceremony, the athletes attended the closing banquet, and while people danced, Tatsuya spotted Masaki speaking with Miyuki. As an overprotective older brother, he walked up to them. Seeing the two standing side by side, Masaki asked if they were related and Tatsuya told him yes. It seemed that Masaki's dislike for Tatsuya stemmed from the fact that he believed Tatsuya and Miyuki were an item. The siblings just laughed at his dumbness, and Tatsuya suggested that Miyuki dance with Masaki. While they danced, Honoko approached Tatsuya, but because she was shy, she couldn't ask him to dance. Since Tatsuya was a dense fool, he had no idea what she wanted until Erika slid up to him and told him, so asked Honoko to dance, which made her very happy. Eventually, he ended up dancing with a few other girls from their team, and when he took a break, Jumanji asked to speak with him. The two went out to the garden, and while they were there, Jumanji asked Tatsuya if he was part of the 10 master clans. Even though he was, Tatsuya denied it, so Jumanji advised him to join them by marrying Mayumi. Tatsuya told him he was far too young to be thinking about marriage, but Jumanji asked him to think things through. He reminded him that he defeated Masaki, who was the next head of the 10 master clans, and said there was no way they would let him be. After Jumanji walked away, Miyuki walked up to her brother and asked what he discussed with Jumanji. Tatsuya told her it was nothing important, so she asked him to dance with her and he agreed. Do you think the 10 master clans would come after Tatsuya, or would he find a way to turn them into his allies? If you wish to find out what becomes of Tatsuya, let us know by commenting more. See you in the next video.